Good. So there is a second story, which is an American story. It's not a French one, it's an American story. It is the story of Darwin Smith. I don't know if you've heard about him. Darwin Smith was the CEO of Kimberly-Clark for 20 years. He was a former lawyer. Kimberly-Clark is a company which was producing coated paper during 100 years. It's a company that had 100 years of corporate history, producing coated paper. And in 1971, Darwin Smith, who was a former lawyer, was made a CEO of the company. The interesting thing in the life of Darwin Smith is that when he became CEO of the company, one of the first things that he did was to look at his life, to look at his people, the employees of the organization, the top management, to look at the business, look at the situation of the business in the world of the coated paper industry, and to draw conclusions. He was very wise, he was prudent, he looked at people, he listened to them, he investigated, had a strong pick of analysis, and he came to the conclusion, to two conclusions, I would say. The first conclusion was that it's a human conclusion. The people inside the organization look more like functionaries than like real people. Because the coated paper had no competition. It was like in Soviet Union. No competition. So very high price and low quality. No competition. There was no competition really in the coated paper industry. So the employees of Kimberly-Clark with the years became for him not real leaders, but the opposite of leadership, real functionaries. And he felt very sorry for these people. And he also felt that there is a danger for him to become a functionary. And Darwin Smith didn't want at any price to become a functionary. He had a good salary. Of course, he had a good salary. He was the CEO of a big corporation. He could feed his family and his 4 children. But he thought, well, I was not born for that. I was not born to be a functionary in this industry, although I earn a lot of money being the CEO of the corporation. This is not what my life is about. So the first reaction of Darwin Smith is spiritual reaction, sound reaction of a man who understands that life is not about earning $30,000 per month. Life is about something greater than that. So this was the first thing that he saw, and he was very unhappy with that. He has to work with functionaries. And the second thing that he saw is the business side, the management side. A deep intuition he had that the coated paper is not the future. That the future is going to be the consumer paper industry. So he saw two things, and in these two things that he saw, so you see, like Michelin, he was a man that was very prudent. He had practical wisdom, and he was a real businessman. He didn't make a mistake. And then Michelin understood quite quickly that Marius Mignol was a genius when other people around did not. And Darwin Smith understood quite quickly that the coated paper industry is not the future or has no future, when very few people at that time saw the reality of the business. So you see, these people, they are not only deep people, they are enlightened. Their mind is right, is working very well. They are not just people with a big heart. They are people with a very practical mind and a deep intuition and a capacity for practical wisdom in general and in the very specific sphere of business. So Smith, out of those considerations, came to the conclusion that he has to do something. The first thing was that he cannot himself become a functionary. And he has to help these people. Because Smith, when he looked at his employees, he saw functionaries. But in the deepest of his mind, of his soul, and of his heart, he was aware that these functionaries are functionaries because of the business situation of a monopoly. But he trusts human beings. He trusts his people. He thought they are not called to be functionaries forever. We can transform them. They can become human beings again. And this is my job. And the same attitude as in Mr. Michelin. Love for a human being. The sense of the dignity of the human person. He felt very unhappy for these people before then feeling unhappy for himself. He felt his responsibility for helping those people becoming human beings again. And this was the fundamental question for him. The fundamental question was not a business question. The fundamental question for him was, these employees of mine, these managers of mine, what I'm going to do with them. And out of this consideration, he built a management plan, which was fascinating and which even looked crazy for the majority of people. What did Darwin Smith, what is the decision he came to? He decided to sell off all the mines all over the United States, even those in Wisconsin, the headquarters of Kimberly. Sell 100 years of corporate history, invest that money into the consumer paper industry, because in the consumer paper industry we have giants. Procter & Gamble, 3M, Scott Paper. And these giants will oblige us to become great people or die. This is, you would say, an incredible strategy. But this is a strategy, a management strategy of a great person who was worried, first of all, of his people. And he understood, in order to transform his functionaries into human beings, he had to bring them into the fire of a war. You don't transform a functionary into a human being in 5 minutes just because you want it. There must be an incredible challenge there, so that people begin to rediscover who they are, accept the challenge, transform themselves, discover their talents, multiply, and work hard, find a meaning in their work and in their lives. He was really, he was proposing a real, I would say, spiritual conversion for people. He was a great leader because he was capable of communicating also that vision that he had. He had to Of course, he had to say goodbye to certain people in the organization, to those who didn't want to follow this strategy because they were afraid of such a strategy. But he understood the common good of the organization is higher than the personal good of each one of the members of the organization. So he practiced justice. I don't know, 10, 20% of the people left the organization when they heard about the new strategy. But the others were convinced that this was the right thing to do. He trusted his people. And they went forward. And they sold everything. And they invested in Kleenex, Huggies, all those stuff you know about. This is Kimberly-Clark in the 1970s. And these people began to work. And they began to stop being functionaries. And they began to be creative. Began to feel solidarity between themselves. Feel the challenge of life, the challenge of business, to work hard, to give the best of themselves, to multiply their talents and to put them at the service of the whole organization. And they worked. The business media was upset with that guy. He didn't fit. Forbes, Financial Times, they accused him of being an idiot. Well, it's not easy when at the end of the day you buy a newspaper and you see your picture there and it's written idiot. And you know it's not an evening newspaper. It's a serious newspaper that your colleagues are reading. Smith never answered any article about him in the business media. No one will see after what does this mean? What is the virtue that is behind that? But the first thing, the fact is this: Smith never answered, never justified his action before the crowd, before the media, never. He went on, they worked hard, and after 3 years, the company had better financial results than those giants we mentioned before, 3M, Procter & Gamble, Scott Paper. They won the war. And they are the more powerful company in the world in the consumer paper industry. Smith was a kind of new, not just a new CEO, but he was a new founder of the organization. He created a new corporate culture inside the Kimberly-Clark company. People very often tell me, well, he was a crazy man. He was crazy, that guy. You will see when we will speak about the virtue of magnanimity that small people interpret magnanimity as craziness because they cannot enter the world of the great souls. So everything that's great, it's for them crazy. And that's normal, it's common sense. You're absolutely in another world. So a great soul for you is a crazy person, because you are not in his world. That was Socrates when he was dying. Well, Socrates is the kind of person who never listened to the opinion of the mob. People say, well, he was despising the mob. He was a kind of proud person. No, it's not pride. It's just magnanimity. Magnanimity is a virtue of those people who understand perfectly that the small-minded cannot enter your world. And then you don't have even to despise them. You just don't think about them. There is no relationship between your world and their world. So you don't despise them. You just don't take into consideration what they tell you. They cannot give you advice. That's why Smith, in the end of the day, didn't care about what Forbes and Financial Times was writing about him. He didn't care at all. This guy was exactly as Socrates. I'm not even sure he was reading those articles. This is the world, the psychological world of greatness. These are people that understand what's greatness about and understand that not everybody has greatness in his soul. What is interesting in this Darwin Smith story is that it has a lot of similitudes with the French story of Michelin. It is a man that, like Michelin, had a vision of what leadership is about, to achieve greatness by bringing out the greatness in others. He wanted, first of all, to achieve greatness, to transform his people, to transform these people into functionaries, from the state of functionaries into the state of human beings. So he wanted to make these people great people. So he had a vision of service of his people. He understood that he was a servant of human beings. He was a servant of his employees, and he wanted his employees to be great people. And this was the beginning of the whole Kimberly-Clark transformation. He was moved by one basic idea. I don't want these functionaries to be functionaries forever. I want them to become real human beings, so I'm going to work on that. And he built a strategy for that. His management strategy is directed towards the leadership. It's a very interesting case in which it's for leadership reasons that he chose this management strategy. There could have been many different strategies, by the way, at that time for the survival and the future of Kimberly-Clark. But he chose an extraordinary strategy, a very demanding strategy, because he had a plan. It was a human plan, the spiritual transformation of his own people. That's why people say from the outside, this is a crazy plan, because it's crazy from a pure management point of view. But if you have in mind what he intended to do with his people, then it is not crazy. It was probably the only way out. When you understand the mind of the guy, the heart of the person, you say it's common sense. Logical. There is an incredible logic in the mind of those people. There is no contradiction. He trusted his people. He worked with them. And in 3 years, in a period of 3 years, they achieved incredible financial results. They won the war, and the company became what it is now, with a new corporate culture, with a model to be imitated, Darwin Smith, with a real leadership, with a culture of virtuous leadership. And at the same time, they achieved incredible financial management results. So from this story, you see the same thing. And leadership is very much this, to focus on human beings. Management is about achieving goals, which is a good thing. We need a lot of managers in the world when we need to achieve certain goals. Leadership is about transforming people. And I repeat, these two things go hand in hand, but they are different. The approach is different. The leadership approach is the people, the human beings, first. The management thing is the goals. You see in Darwin Smith, there is no contradiction. It's like in Edward Michelin, no contradiction between management and leadership. On the opposite, they see perfectly that if we want a right management, we need to have a leadership. But common sense told him, first take care of your people. And the material results, if they come, they would be incredible. He was aware, Smith, that they can collapse. Smith is not God. So he was aware that they are going to try, but he didn't know if they were going to succeed. And that's the interesting thing. It means that he really took a risk. He took a big risk. But why such people are capable of taking such a risk? It's because for them, the human beings are more important than the things. People are more important than things. So for them, in the end of the day, the risk is a minimum risk, because on the human level, you can get only positive things. My people are functionaries. They must stop being functionaries. I know the strategy I am choosing for them now will help them stop being functionaries. So this is good. I don't know if we are going to achieve good results on the material side. I'm not aware. I'm not sure about that. I hope so. I have the intuition that we will. But there is a risk. And I am ready to go. I am ready to run that risk because I love my people more than our financial results. That's so simple. That's why those people can take a risk, and a big risk at that. While other people, those who are just managers that have never practiced leadership, will always consider Darwin Smith's strategy as the most crazy strategy in the history of humanity in terms of management. Because they don't care for people. The important thing for them is, in the end of the day, the material results. What's going to happen to the employees, it's not their problem. Their problem is the numbers, and specifically the financial numbers. So when we understand those things, then we understand the people, and we understand the world of Darwin Smith. We understand what is in his mind, what is in his heart. These are great people. These are extraordinary people. All the business culture is going against them. That's why he was hated by the business media for years. Forbes Forge is an English word, but Forbes is also an English word. Forbes apologized. Who was the hero of the business media at that time? It was a guy called Stanley Gold, who was the CEO of a corporation called Rubbermaid. Stanley Gold in the 70s took a little company, and just transformed it into something very big. He was an incredible manager. He was a very competent person. We'll speak a bit about him after, but the business media loved this man because he was a great manager, and in a short period of time, he transformed a little company into something huge. And so all the business community was fascinated by the guy, amazed by his capacity, and he was considered as a national hero in America, at least in the business media. Well, what happened to Rubbermaid? 2 years after Gold left Rubbermaid, he retired. Rubbermaid was bought by the competitor, Newell. What happened? It happened that there was no leadership, no succession, no strategy, no people prepared for the future. He was a manager who was working like a dictator and was proud of himself. And when they asked him, Mr. Gold, look what happened to your company after you left, he said, of course, without me, it's impossible. Just incredible. The guy was the greatest guy in the history of humanity because the fact that his company collapsed after he left was a sign of his own greatness. It's exactly the opposite of what we're speaking about. For him, it was clear, I am irreplaceable. That's what he said to the journalist. I am irreplaceable. So it's normal that he collapsed after I left. Without me, impossible. I am great. I'm extraordinarily beautiful. You see how people can become just crazy. This Galt was the hero of the media in the 70s, 80s. When Darwin Smith was the victim. So this is the Darwin Smith story. It's an American story. And from this, what you can get the same thing as you get from the Michelin story. Because these people understand that leadership is about achieving greatness by bringing out the greatness in others. So it's about greatness and about service. Look at Smith. The way he served his employees is incredible. He really did what we say, educere. He brought out the best in his people. And he found a strategy to do that. He had to think about it. He educated them. He gave a meaning in their lives, in their work, helped them discover their talents, multiply it. He created leaders. He generated leaders. So it's a transformational process that he began, he operated. He's a servant. But he didn't serve people by preparing breakfast for his employees. You agree with me? He never prepared breakfast for his people. He served them by looking for spiritual greatness in them and by giving them the capacity for personal development. And he did it very well. It's an incredible service to humanity he did. This was his contribution to humanity. He is a servant and he served through greatness. He did the same as Edward Michelin. The same kind of people. Different time, different country, but the same human nature. The same virtues in a different context. The same virtues. Magnanimity and humility. Greatness and service. Leadership. When you study the story of Herb Kelleher, you find a lot of similar things than in those two stories I mentioned before. What was the dream of that man? The dream of Herb was very simple. He wanted people to be able to travel to places where they were always dreaming to travel to, but probably had not the money to go there. So he wanted low prices to make trips possible for many people on Earth, and at the same time to keep the label of the services, because it's quite easy to have a company who say, okay, low prices, but if you go to a destination, you're lucky. Well, this is not complicated. I can do it. But to tell people low prices, but we're going to keep up the level of the services for the customer, for the client, this is a challenge. And this was the dream of Kelleher. It was a very hard time. It began in Texas, as you remember. There was a big monopoly there. He had to fight during years and years against those monopolies. He was a very enduring person, very courageous, very daring. Had been fighting for years, for decades against those monopolies in order to get the right to do what he did. A man with a dream. What makes Kelleher similar to the two others? What makes him similar to the two others, it is the vision of the human person. He's a very successful businessman. Southwest Airlines is a very successful company. I think it is the number one in the world for the number of passengers transported every year. So it's a very, very successful company. Herb Kelleher, he loved people. At least he loved his employees. When he heard that there was such a thing as a human resource department, he said, well, this sounds like Stalin 5 years plan. And he destroyed this human resource department, and he created what he called, well, he didn't destroy it because it was his own company, but he called this, what people call the human resource department, he called it people's department. So they have at Southwest a people's department because they say this is what we do. We deal with people, not with human resources. Human beings are not resources. Human beings are an end in itself. You see how far we've gone with this liberal capitalistic mentality. We use the word resources when we speak about human beings. It's awful. Human beings are an end in itself, not a resource, like a capital, like the machinery. This is what leaders feel immediately when they see this. They feel unhappy with those concepts. And Kelleher was very, very much on the same line as the two others, like Michelin and Darwin Smith. He had a very high vision of the dignity of the human person. And he really loved his employees. And when a customer would be unhappy of the behavior of one of his employees, Kelleher was very direct about that. He said always to that customer, do not abuse my people. It's just incredible. In business, when you say to a customer, don't abuse my people. Well, this means that for you, the clients might have been very surprised by the answer. Because the trend in business has been during 200 years, the client is always right. But for Kelleher, the client is always right. This is rationalization. The client is not always right. When you focus on people, you understand that the client is not always right. When you focus on financial results, yes, the client is always right. And Herb Kelleher focused on people, on his people, the people he hired. This is justice. This is common sense. First, your people. First, your family. Then the others. And Herb was used to say common sense. He said in the universities, we're thinking during 20 years in all the American universities and European business schools, what is more important? The clients, the shareholders, the employees. He said, how is it possible that we've been thinking about that? He said, how is it possible that we have been asking ourselves what's more important? You know, these people who are real leaders, I would say they face all this business liberal culture with a lot of courage. Of course, my people, my employees are more important than the customer and than the shareholders. This is common sense. Common sense. All those things that are common sense for those people are not common sense for those whose basic motivation is to make money. But for those people who are real leaders, it's common sense. And this common sense, I repeat, makes business easier and also makes management very productive. Everybody knows Southwest is a very successful company. But at the foundation of this success, there is a man with a very precise vision. And that vision is a vision of humanity, a vision of self, a vision of the human being. He has a sense of the dignity of the human person. Treated people very well, and his people very well. He went against the grain in the business world, in the capitalistic, liberal capitalistic world in which he was living. Herb Kelleher is the man that has to be studied. When all those people have their flaws, they have their limitations, they have their problems. But don't think that all we're speaking about saints. We're speaking about real virtuous leaders. Okay? And some of them are saints. And some of them are not still saints. But all those guys are virtuous leaders because they did the thing the virtuous leaders do. They want greatness for their people. They focus on human beings, first of all. And they know that business is about personal and organizational greatness. Personal, first of all, personal greatness. That business is not about making money. Making money is a necessity for business, but it is not the goal of business. For these people, it's not. These people, 100 years ago, they would not have gone to business. They would have gone to the army and to politics, because these were the places where they could have achieved greatness. Nowadays, the business life is so powerful, so many things can be done, so that people who look for greatness also go to the business life. Many people that are greedy also go to the business life, and they still go to it, and they will still go to it during the next centuries. But many people go to business because in business is the place where they can make a lot of decisions, where they can grow in virtues, when they can develop character, where they can run risks and be rewarded for the risks they run. So a lot of people can achieve really greatness in business, and it's more difficult for them to achieve it nowadays in the military or in politics. But in the past, it was like this. They went to politics and the military. So the business has become a place for greatness, I would say, 50 or 100 years ago. But I'm not sure that in the future, business will be the sphere for greatness. I feel that the sphere for greatness will be very much education. People are going to be uneducated. The masses are going to be uneducated with a lot of knowledge, but absolutely uneducated. So there will be a big desire for true education in the sense we're using it, the word we're using, in the sense that we're using this word. And probably in 100 years, people who will be really in search for greatness will switch to education. I'm not sure of it. I just feel it. Just intuition. Now it's business. How long business is going to be the leading sphere of life, I don't know. But I'm not convinced that it is forever. Probably it is not. Why would it be? But now it is. So it is important to teach leadership to business leaders because they are showing to the young generation what it is. Young people are more attracted by business leaders than by warriors nowadays or by politicians. So you have to We have to give them the example of people in business who do the right thing. So these three people are examples of people in business that I really think have done the right thing, have done it very well, and at the same time have achieved incredible material results. So their management is excellent, their leadership is magnificent, and their management is excellent. So nobody can say virtuous leadership doesn't work. It works perfectly. So I repeat, those who don't believe in it are people who rationalize. They don't want to believe in it because they have problems, because they don't want to love the others. Because when they look at you, they see in you the bottom line, not the Son of God. And they need a real spiritual conversion in order to come to this. And they are not ready for that. That's why they tell you, it doesn't work, Alex. You are cheating us. You are lying to us. It doesn't work. But we know it works because we have three powerful examples that have been working very well. You see, so remember this, many people have this tendency to rationalize, which is to justify their position and to try to tell you human beings are bad. This is my experience. So I have to build a system based on this. My employees have to be my servants. I pay them, so they have to serve the company. I'm not here to serve them. Because we are all bad, we are all evil. Business is evil, but it's necessary evil. Because without business, there is no toilet paper. That's it. There is no Coca-Cola, no toilet paper. So business is evil, but it is good for humanity. The common good needs business, but business in itself, it's evil. So behave like evil. You're evil man and evil woman, but you are necessary to the common good, and God forgives you everything because of what you bring to the others. Many people think like this. Many people have been thinking like this during the last 200 years. Business is evil. It's greed. But it's good greed. It moves people forward. It moves people towards action. And this action brings us all the material goods we need. So many people are convinced of this. With these people, we cannot speak about virtuous leadership. It's a nonsense. The whole thing is evil for them. So there is no place for the human being, no place for virtue. Good.